Excellent. We are live. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's roundtable discussion on field problems nobody talks about. Uh, this webinar is sponsored by Contour. This is the only shameless plug that you'll get during this presentation. Contour delivers products and software for transforming underground conditions into actionable insight. Our end-to-end workflow solution helps professionals work smarter, faster, and safer. From intelligent software solutions to high-performance GPR systems, Contour ensures quality and efficiency in every step, reducing unknown risks and helping you keep your projects on time and in budget. So remember Contour, providing subsurface insights for safe and thriving communities since 2001. I'm Bill Owen. I'm your moderator for this webinar. Today, we're doing something a little different from our previous webinars. This time, we're not even limiting the topic to ground penetrating radar. Today, there are no polished case studies. There's no parade of success stories. There's just three experienced professionals sharing the work stories that usually only come out at dinner after conferences. Things like the permit that didn't show up on time, the scope change that occurred mid-job, the data that looked good until it wasn't, and the tough judgment calls we've all had to make in the field. Now, we'll keep the conversation honest, practical, and useful, and we'll try to pair every war story with what actually worked or what we wish we'd done differently. Introducing your panel today, I have Will Dalrymple, Jorgen Bergstrom, and Forrest Sim. Will is chief of the Geophysics and Geology branch at the California Department of Transportation. Will brings more than 21 years of experience across the private and public sectors with expertise in seismic, electromagnetic, magnetic, GPR, and electrical methods on transportation, environmental, UXO, and nuclear projects. He's a licensed professional geophysicist in California and also holds a California Blaster's license. So welcome, Will. Jorgen Bergstrom is a principal geophysicist at Collier Geophysics. Jorgen has 28 years of experience in near-surface geophysics in the US and Europe. He has led numerous investigations using GPR, resistivity, seismic, magnetic, electromagnetic, and acoustic methods. He routinely provides subsurface utility engineering services, performs non-destructive testing of concrete, and conducts borehole logging for fracture orientation and fluid flow. Jorgen has also authored numerous published papers on geophysical technologies and applications. So welcome, Jorgen. And finally, we have Forrest Sim. He's the founder and principal at Enhanced Scanning out of Lake Elsinore, California. Forrest founded Enhanced Scanning in 2019 and has built it into a trusted provider of utility locating, concrete scanning, and advanced subsurface imaging services. He's a recognized expert in ground penetrating radar applications for construction and infrastructure projects. He frequently speaks at industry events and co-hosts the Concrete Conversations podcast to share practical knowledge with the field community. So welcome, Forrest. Let's go through here and get our webinar introduction. Now, of course, this is a new format for us. We're using Zoho Webinar. All participants are muted during the webinar. Please use the Q&A function to submit questions. We'll aim to answer where possible, either within the Q&A window or live during the broadcast. And all questions and answers, by the way, are visible to all participants, so make them intelligible and intelligent. So, going to topic one. We've all been in situations where, regardless of how hard we've tried or how well we plan the survey, we get out on the job site and things just aren't working the way we want it to. So the question for the first question for the panel is, have you ever been in a situation where you realized on day one of a geophysical survey that you were going to have problems collecting usable data? And so the second part of that question is, what happened and how did you handle it? So let's start with Forrest.
Yes. So, actually, I'm thinking about a recent project that I had. It was in Kentucky, and I'm not sure if you've ever been to Kentucky. They have a lot of hills everywhere. Is just, and that's because that's a karstic. They have sinkholes everywhere, and so when the ground presumably at some point was flattish, And then there were sinkholes, and those infilled and made the ground just hilly everywhere. And there's steep hills all over the place. And before I went out there, I knew that there was, I've done a project in Kentucky before, and I knew that there were going to be some hills, but, whatever, some hills. But in the area of this, of my project, the scope area was, it just so happened that it had the steepest hills that I've ever seen that I could not reasonably call mountains. And so they were too steep. I was pulling a GPR unit behind me, and I would have rolled my side by side if I was running my transects orthogonally, and if I stayed true to the spacing and the orientation that I had planned for my transects, I would have rolled the side by side, and I opted not to do that. So what that meant is that where in areas where the slope was too steep, in some areas I just couldn't collect data. They're just gaps in the data. And I told the customer, if you really want these areas covered, then basically the site conditions are unexpectedly, prohibitively difficult. And I could come back and we could try to literally walk the thing up and down. But I mean, some of those areas, they were so steep that I don't know if I could even walk up it without just slipping back down. So some areas I just couldn't scan, and others, if you look at the paths where I was collecting, it'll be real nice and parallel transects all in here, and then all of a sudden you've got something wonky in here where I'm just trying to fill in some data somehow, and those data collection lines look ugly, but I was able to get something in there. But I just was unprepared for how steep those hills were in that area. It's far steeper than the other area in Kentucky where I'd previously done some work. And so I had a plan for how to collect everything, and I just had to adapt it to, okay, well, I'm going to get some data in there, and it's going to look like I was maybe on a little bit more cough syrup than I should have been, but I was able to collect something there.
Great. Have you ever had to hang off of ropes on a survey?
No, but I've seen pictures of cool guys on LinkedIn who have. So still waiting to do that one. When is Contour gonna get me to do a joint project with them to dangle me off of a cliff or something? I'll do it. Let's get a Contour antenna, and I'll drag it up the side of a rock face. It sounds great. Half Dome. Let's go to Yosemite.
We can stick you in a belt and hang you off of a side of the face.
Perfect. Calendar's open. Let's do it.
All right. Will, how about you? Have you ever been in a situation where everything has been going sideways, and how did you handle that?
Yeah, I do a lot of seismic work, and I had a project up in Lassen National Park, where there's a lot of volcanics up there. And we're doing a nice short refraction survey, one of those that was about 72 meters long. And no matter what we used, hammers, Betsy size gun, we were getting terrible data. We didn't have any traffic going by. We didn't have wind or anything like that. We just couldn't get data in the ground. So that was one of those. We called up our client. We said, hey, you know what? We just can't make this work. We have to come back with some explosives and make some phone calls, get permissions and all that to go out and do that. So we headed back a couple of weeks later and brought out some explosives to try and make it work. And you know what? Honestly, it didn't make it any better. It was just the geology out there for that sort of thing. So we ended up actually shortening up the lines a bit in order to get some better data so I could try to pick it, something like that, right? Similar things happen on other projects. For the most part, we get too much traffic or too much noise from all that kind of things happening during the day. And sometimes you just have to shift and just say, you know what, now we've got to do all night work or something like that instead to try to get a little bit quieter out there. So a few of those like that is what we normally have to run across.
I mean, speaking from experience as well, anytime working within transportation right away, it's always a challenging environment because you can't stop traffic usually, and so you're always working around high noise environment, and it's terrible. And especially when you get stuff like that where there's no refraction at all you're seeing are direct arrivals in your data. It doesn't seem to matter. It just all there's nothing there to look at. um, so all right,
There's a lot of
Jorgen, how
squinting at
oh
data.
sorry, yeah,
Sorry,
a
that I'm
lot,
just
lot,
saying
a
there's a lot of
lot of
squinting at data.
squinting.
Hey, Will,
Yes.
with a blaster's license, I mean, I just got to ask, is this it, sometimes when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. And look, when you've got a blaster's license, you're like, well, obviously we need to apply more explosives here. I mean, just be honest. This is a safe place, man. Just tell
Yeah.
us.
Well, honestly, because I didn't have a blaster's license where I came to Caltrans, right? Blasting was something that was really special and neat, right? That you'd have to spend a lot of money for to make happen. But yeah, nowadays you're like, well, I guess I'll just switch to explosives. I guess that'll work out fine. I'll just let my clients know, make a couple of phone calls to the sheriffs and say, I'm going to be out there. And yeah, I switched to explosives a whole lot sooner. Before in the private, you're doing lines that have to be at least, I don't know, 700,000 feet long or something like that before I would consider explosives. Over here, 126 meters. And I'm like, that's fine. I'll use some explosives. That's pretty reasonable.
And
Yeah.
I started following you recently on LinkedIn, and I expect to see some pretty cool pictures on your posts.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I'm gonna have to start sharing them then. I'm not I'm not a big social media kind of guy, but I guess I better learn.
Yeah, like Caltrans ascribes to the Marines motto: "There's no problem that can't be solved with a suitable application of explosives." So, but all right, let's go to Jorgen. Jorgen, how about you? What's your take on this particular question?
So for me, we do a lot of work at various industrial sites and abandoned sites. And one common issue that we have is that our client will tell us that there's nothing there. It's a wide open area, and we get there and it's not. And I remember one area where there was just a tremendous amount of trash, like pallets of trash, some pallets packed so tight together you couldn't even walk in between, and just big piles of trash and supplies of different kinds. And we were at this site. We were investigating karst bedrock, so you got overburden on top of limestone. We're using seismic in the RI, and we of course had to redesign our survey to be able to get some reasonable straight lines in there, in the areas where there was some access. But some electrodes and geophones we planted in trash and hope for the best, and you never know what you're gonna get in situations like that. And looking at data in the evening, it didn't look good, so we were thinking about should we continue or not. I made a call, which I typically do, to let's do the project. You're out there, you've spent a lot of time and money already getting to the site, getting equipment there. It's the best at that point is to just continue collecting as much data as you can, and as you have planned to do. And if it turns out afterwards that the data was not useful, you deal with the client at that point, but don't stop midways. And I've also learned over the years that if you're doing a multi-method survey and you might have some other sources of information, might be some borings, might be some historic data. Usually, you in the very end of it, when you've had a chance to go through all your data sets and your processing, you are in better shape than you thought you were when you're out in the field. So many times I've left the site not being 100% sure if it will work out or not, but I've learned to trust that process. Starting with the knowns, looking at all the data, and working through it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure we've all been in those situations where you go on a project and you've seen that the site conditions aren't the way you expected to get out there. And especially the ones with lots of stuff you have to work around are always going to be challenging topics or challenging areas to work. So thank you, Jorgen.
Oh yeah,
Very, very good.
one other interesting little thing, that this site was at the bottom of a steep valley,
Uh,
and this is an issue of the past, but we had GPS signals for like 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evenings when the satellites
oh
were
no.
just right for us to
Mhm.
get some coordinates.
Ah,
So
so were
of
you?
course that's not the case anymore, but it was kind of a fun extra complication on that side.
Oh, so is that when you had to bring your Brunton out and your Brunton and your tape and do everything manually?
Yeah, that's what you had to do on in a lot of cases, or toll stations, which of course we didn't have for this site because we expected to be able to use GPS.
Course. Everybody wants to. It's like, yeah, it's GPS is great until it's not, always. Um, I want to take about 1 minute to close out this topic and talk about what you would tell your junior field techs to look for and communicate to your field chief the moment something looks off. Um, Will, let's start with you on that one.
Hmm.
What would you tell your field techs to look for? It's like you're on the project, and the first thing you want to communicate to them is like, if you see X, let me know.
What I normally look for and tell them when they're out there in the field is just anything that they're not used to, anything that changes out in the field, anything that is something they haven't seen before, because usually changes are what bring the problems. When you're looking at, say, your noise record for a static refraction line, do you see something sort of bouncing in now and then that you can't really track down what there's coming from? That could be electrical noise or something like that. Or when you're doing like a GPR survey or something like that, right? Are your returns coming back something that you normally would see for, say, like a bridge deck or anything like that, or is everything looking pretty blank and not what you would see for like layered data? Something just to be aware of. I know a lot of times, especially the newer people, they just want to get the data collected right away. So don't really think about looking at the data quality right away first, or seeing if something is different than what they expect. They just want to get out there and just get it done. So yeah, just something look for some differences out there, something they're not used to.
Okay. Jorgen, how about you?
So at my first consultant job, the guy I was working with, kind of my supervisor and PM on a lot of the projects. One of his favorite phrases was "inspect, don't expect," and this is something that I have brought with me, and also telling the younger staff that whatever clients or people on site are telling you, don't take that for gospel. Do your survey with an open mind, and investigate the data as soon as you possibly can, and make your own judgments based on what you're actually seeing in the data.
Okay, great. Forrest, how about you?
Well, I'd echo both of those sentiments loud and clear. I mean, when my guys are out in the field, if it's very much a, hey, you know what the data is supposed to look like, and there's a range up and down of what it's supposed to look like that could be normal. If it's way outside of that, then obviously we have either some really odd site conditions, or sometimes there's a problem with the hardware. On my before I did that project out in Kentucky, I installed I fabricated MacGyvered this secondary camera to mount on the back there at an angle where I could see the GPR antenna, and and then I had a screen inside the cab there so that I could see if the antenna flipped over because it hit like a root ball or a rock that was only bare, that was a little bit below the grass or something. And there were a number of times when I was watching the data like streaming there more closely than I was watching the camera, and I saw that, whoa, why is this looking so bad? And I look at the camera and see, oh, the antenna's upside down. Okay, we gotta go and fix that. So sometimes it's as simple as looking to see that, make sure the inside parts aren't on the outside, some basic stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like the antennas not being where they're supposed to be is always like a huge challenge.
Yeah,
So,
or like things that used to be together being now in two parts. That's a big red flag.
absolutely. All right, moving on to the next topic. We all have things that we have to do in the survey before we even turn the equipment on in the field. Like getting there, getting your equipment staged, figuring out what permits you need to get access to the project. Um, For you, the panelists, what is the most frustrating non-technical issue that has ever blocked or derailed a survey? And Jorgen, I'll start with you.
Yeah, it was a while ago, but I would say for me and for us, it's been stolen equipment, especially on out of town jobs.
Ouch.
Because that will shut down your crew, or could, if you don't happen to have backup of that particular item that was stolen, and you could also, of course, lose data. So in some areas, some situations, nothing you can do about it, but of course you can do whatever you can to protect your equipment, as well as making sure you back up data and not have your computer, if that's where the data is on, and a thumb drive that you backed it up to in the same computer bag. And if they're stolen, you lose both. So yeah, we have had situations like that where we had to somehow figure out how to get replacement equipment, and of course recollect data because of theft.
Yeah, that's losing equipment is never fun. Uh, Forrest, how about you?
Locked gates. We had a project years ago where there was 4 hours away, and my excuse me, it was this vacant lot that had a chain link fence around the whole thing, and we knew the gate was going to be locked, but the customer gave us the combination, and my guy who was there out on that project, he's he's in his 30s, and so he's used the combination lock a few times before in his life, so he knew how the things worked, and that combination just did not work. And we actually never figured out if it was because the combination was wrong or because the lock was just out in the weather for years, and it was just too rusted. The mechanism inside was just seized or something. But my guy stood there for like a half hour, 45 minutes on the phone with the customer making calls back and forth because there was no side contact, right? So the customer over the phone kept making calls and checking files and trying to make sure this was the right combination. And the customer was saying, well, can you just cut it off with an angle grinder? I said, well, I mean, we don't go out to a job site with an angle grinder. I've got one in my garage, but I guess we could go to a hardware store, but we're going to need to put a couple more zeros on the end of this project if we're going to take the liability of my guy using an angle grinder, and because I know my insurance is not going to cover it if he cuts his finger off. And so what ended up happening is we had to just demob from the site because we couldn't get into there's just a little lock on a chain link fence that we just couldn't get through, and the customer we had to just reschedule for a couple weeks later, and it was just a colossal waste of time. It was very, very aggravating.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and no bolt cutters at all, huh?
I mean, like it was a tiny little town. I think there wasn't even a hardware store in that town. It was just
Oh no.
it was out in the middle of nowhere. I think they had a gas
Mhm.
station.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
And Will, how about you?
I would echo what they both said before, and I will say I used to carry around bolt cutters for that exact situation. And we would tell them afterward, we would just break it and tell them afterwards, like, oh, we went through it. And they're like, oh, do you need permission? I'm like, no, we're just telling you so you can fix it later. We're going to go home. That's how we get on it. But for me, a lot of my problems, I've had to travel across all the states as well as out of the country, but as we get the same kind of problems across the states. It is endangered species, whether plants or animals, that can get in the way of surveys. One of the ones I remember specifically is Edwards Air Force Base. I was working on one of their back lots out there where they had contamination from dumping jet fuel, and we're helping track their contamination plumes where they had a basin out there, and we're trying to use seismic refraction to try to map that basin. So we're going to do long lines with explosive blasting out there. And so we were setting up the lines and drilling holes. And I'm walking over there, and I see this woman holding what looked like a TV antenna, an old TV antenna you see back in people's houses back in the day. I'm like, and we're about to, set up explosives. I'm like, where did she come from? Turns out she was from USGS, and they had seeded the entire area with desert tortoises. If you guys aren't familiar with desert tortoises, there's these animals that if you go near them, they might void their bladder and die. And that's how endangered they are, right? So that shut down the entire project for 2 weeks because we found out that actually had turned that whole area into an endangered desert tortoise habitat. We're actually able to go back later on with the USGS biologists on site to make sure we didn't get too close to the desert tortoises. But yeah, those kind of things just really set back. I run across like fruit flies that we can't work near, or Indiana fruit bats near a nuclear power plant. And they're, this is kind of places that in like the next month, they're going to bulldoze it all down anyway, type of thing like that. But yeah, for me, it's a lot of endangered plants and animals that can really delay things that people don't know about.
Oh, wow. That's always a problem. Yeah, I know we've seen that happen before. You can't get spotted owls were always a big one as well. You couldn't do your work during spotted owl breeding season if you were up in Northern California. So always something that was um, a challenge to work with on the permitting side and on the environmental side. Um, so let's move on to the third topic. And Will, now that I've got you on the hook,
Oh.
it might as well stay with you. So what do you do? When do you decide when your data aren't good enough to use, and how do you have that conversation with the client?
Well, for me, I like to be honest with the client up front. So when I'm actually at a risk of having my data not be good enough in the first place, like, that's going to happen sometimes. You go to, locations out there, you're like, what? I don't think this is going to work. But I try to be upfront with my clients, at least up front, so I can soften the blow later on when it doesn't work out. But sometimes things beyond your control happen, and you're out there in the middle of the field, you got your seismic line down, you got your data down, or all your stuff just happens to break, right? And you can't get back out there. It's one of those that you just have to grit your teeth, come up and just tell them the truth. There's no point to sugarcoat, no point to lie. For me, I come up and people know that I'm usually pretty straightforward about these sort of things. So I come up and say, hey, this is what happened. My data is not working for these reasons. But what I like to do to help soften it is I don't just call them with problems. I try to call up with solutions. So I don't just say, this happened, we're done. I want to let them know we're still working with them. So I will still say, hey, maybe we can delay to another week, or maybe we can try a different method, or maybe I can get some rentals out there, or maybe I know a different group that may be able to pull this off a little better or something like that. And that's how I usually handle it.
Okay, thank you. Jorgen, how about you?
Yes, I like what Will said. It's important to be honest upfront about it, and always have a solution, not just explain what we couldn't do. Overall, I don't think I've ever had a survey where nothing worked in no place at all. There's usually parts of a site where we just don't know what's going on, and um, what I've been doing and telling everybody to do is to tell the client that, in this area right here, we can't interpret the data. We don't know um, what it's telling us because it's conflicting and it doesn't make sense. And block out those areas, gray them out, hash them out on maps and figures, and so that the client knows that between these 2 points here or in this area here, if they need that information, then we're going to have to go a different route. Geophysics is not the solution in those areas, so we might be able to propose a different type of investigation and we think have more chance of success. But that's a lot better than just go through the motion of interpreting everything and not let the client know of the situation.
Thank you. Forrest, how about you?
I have, and Bill, you've done a great job of making this feel like a place where I can open my soul and possibly repent of some sins from my past. And so, since this is a safe place here, I see, we've got Ferry on here and a bunch of other guys who are, Davide, who are not going to make fun of me on LinkedIn. So I feel like I could share some embarrassing experiences. So a long time ago, long enough ago that you can't judge me for this. It's just off the table. A long time ago, I was called out to a project it was out in the desert, and this guy said, "Hey, I've got some wheat that like 10,000 pounds of wheat that 30 years ago, my dad and I buried this underground storage tank. It used to be a gas UST, and they took it out, retired it from this gas station, and he and his dad bought it and buried it out on their ranch, and filled it with 10,000 pounds of wheat. I didn't mention to him that I don't think that wheat that's been sitting in a fuel storage tank for 30 years is probably inedible, but who knows? Maybe that makes it better. But he said he's got this big UST, and he said, I just don't remember where we put it. I remember kind of, sort of, like within, it's probably in these couple of acres here. And this is, again, a long time ago. So I can feel the judgment coming from some of these people on the call, but I'm just going to trudge forward. I said, hey, I feel like 70% confident I might be able to find this. It's also a fiberglass underground storage tank, so it wasn't nice and convenient to be in a steel one. And he said, it's probably like 2/3 full or so. So there's a big air pocket. The thing was, I think he said it's like 15 feet long or something, and maybe 5 feet in diameter, somewhere around those dimensions. And so there's a couple of feet of an air gap at the top. And in my naivete, I said, hey, I could probably, I feel like fairly confident that I'd be able to find this thing. But the only thing that I'd really be able to see is maybe that air gap with my GPR antenna. And he said, and I told him how much it would be, and it was a little higher than he wanted to pay. And he said, how confident do you feel? Put a percent on it. I said, I don't know, 70%. I don't know. And he said, well, I'm a gambling man. How about this? You come out and you try to find it. If you can find it, I'll give you your full fee. If you can't, I'll give you 70% of it. And I said, okay, whatever. Yeah, let's give it a try. He also said, there's a little bit of metal under the lid for getting into the thing. And I thought, okay, so the hinge or the lid thing, it's got a little bit of metal there. Maybe I could see that. It's a kind of a small target. I go out there and I told him I could spend 8 hours, right? You've got me for a full day. And so I start just doing live interpretation also. Again, stop judging me. It's just, it doesn't matter. So I was just pushing this antenna back and forth on some fairly tight transect spacings to try to see this thing. And at 7.5 hours in, I said, tell me more about like the metal. Maybe, I mean, what is the metal? What are you talking about? This is like the hinge, or it's the clasp for holding the lid in, or I mean, what is this? And I had to push him a lot. And he said, well, if you have to know, they're precious metals. I said, oh, there's gold in this.
Okay.
It's not wheat. He said, no. He said, well, and some silver, but I want this for the wheat. You know, this is food storage. And I said, yeah, I bet you do. Yeah, it's the wheat storage. So I said, I brought, it occurred to me, I had enough brain cells rubbing together, making some heat, that it occurred to me that, oh, I've got the wrong tool. I might even be the wrong guy for this, but I at least have the wrong tool. And I told him as much. I said, look, you didn't give me all the information that I needed to bring the right tool out for this. And I said, I've got another half hour here. I'll keep trying. And yeah, we didn't find anything. And if he had, so yeah, in all fairness here, if he had told me all the information I needed, then I might have been able to give him some better data from a better tool. And maybe this would be a very different story where I said, yeah, it's man, we found a bunch of gold bars and it was awesome. Instead of, yeah, we couldn't find this guy's food storage wheat that he wanted to use that smelled like unleaded fuel.
That's a good story.
It's nuts. I thought about, I remember where this guy's ranch is, and I've thought about going back and saying like, hey, I feel 90% confident now. I'd use some different tools. We try this again. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
But
so you're no plans on going out there in the dead of night and locating it with your own metal detectors and shovels, right?
he was a friendly guy, but I think he real subtly let me know. His ranch was in the middle of nowhere, and I think he real subtly wanted to let me know that he has the means whereby to enforce the fence that's around his property, because he let me shoot his AR-15 a few times, and like, hey, this is fun, huh? Just remember, I've got this. I have 2 of these under my bed. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great story. So I think we've got about 10 minutes before we get into the Q&A. So I think why don't we move to our closing topic for the day. This will be a good one because there's all kinds of things we can talk about here. So in terms of your lessons learned and how we can get that information to the next generation of geophysicists coming on behind us, what is the single most valuable lesson from a disaster survey that has improved how you run your jobs now? And Forrest, let's start with you.
So the most important tragedy that's made me a less incompetent field guy. Is that basically what we're getting at here?
Anything? It's a what's been your a humbling moment that ultimately you learned a lesson from it and decided that we're going to here's what I can do in the future to not make this same mistake again.
I don't know if you've made this place quite that safe here, but okay.
It is as far as you want to go.
All right, I'll pick something. There's a long list. I'll pick one that's where nothing bad actually happened. It's just something bad almost happened. I was this is a concrete investigation, and the problem here was not one of data, it was one of user fatigue, right? We had this customer needed to hang something very heavy from a concrete ceiling. So I was up scanning on concrete like this a bunch for a few hours, and I had one location left, and I went and scanned that one. And it's just, this is like being a mechanic. right? Just those guys have huge shoulders, and I just was not. Anyway, it was just exhausting. And so that last location that I was scanning, I was I got sloppy with it, and I saw, some of the guys on here will know what I'm talking about. But I was what I actually saw on the screen was a bundle of post tension cables, not a single post tension cable. But it wasn't a huge bundle; it was a bundle of like probably 3 or something cables. So the hyperbola, instead of being nice and tight, the hyperbola was a little wide, and I didn't think about it. I still remember what that looks like, because I went back afterwards, and rescanned it, and yeah, it was wider than normal. It was wider than everything else that I was seeing in the slab. But my arms, my neck were just so tired from being up like this for the last couple of hours that I got it up here and I just marked it, and I marked it as a single anomaly. And I should have marked that very wide. And the guy, and it was very close. This bundle was very close to where they needed to put their anchor point. And the guy started drilling in there. And fortunately, he didn't cut anything. He nicked the sleeve of one of the outermost post tension cables, and he knew enough, thank goodness, to stop when he saw some black plastic starting to come out of the hole that he was drilling there. And fortunately, yeah. So anyway, he did that, and nothing got cut. There wasn't any expensive repair. The structural engineer determined that he didn't even breach the sleeve. He just nicked the very outside of it. So not a catastrophe, but it almost was. And I just that really solidified in my mind the importance of what we do, because if I take shortcuts, if I decide that I'm too tired to do a good job, if whatever, fill in the excuse you want to use, then like I want to get out. It's Friday afternoon. I want to go out with my family out on the boat on the lake. And I just need to get through this job fast, and I take shortcuts. Safety is a thing for everybody, but in the line of work that I do, if I do a sloppy job, the guy who comes in after me might dig up a gas line or might drill into a post tension cable. And so regardless of how tired my shoulders or how sore my neck is, I have to sit on that spot and keep scanning it until I'm 100% sure that it is safe for the guy who's going to come in after me. And that's the thing, is that it doesn't matter how tired you are or how much you want to get out on that boat. You've got somebody who's coming in after you whose life is very realistically in your hands.
Yeah, very sobering lesson there. I'll point everybody out, remind everybody that we've got 3 poll questions sitting out there. So if you've got a minute, go ahead and check on the polls and participate, and click on your best favorite answer on them. I will move to you, Jorgen. So for you, what's the single most valuable lesson from a disaster survey that's improved how you do your job now?
I think overall, I think that's true for many when you're getting started with this, and you're managing a project where a lot of things go wrong. It could be equipment issues, could be data issues, access, all of the above, and it can be hard to stay calm and stay focused on the task, and you may have problems sleeping and those type of things, and that makes it even harder for you to deal with everything. So I've learned over the years that you get through everything. The sun's gonna go up. It's gonna be another week, another month, and when I sense that with a younger crew out in the field, that they're on one of those jobs where there's a bunch of issues, and you can hear their frustration in their voices and anxiety and all that. Just remind them of that, and I usually say, in 6 months, we will have forgotten all about this. Whatever happened on this project is not going to be an issue anymore. We're going to have new projects with new issues, but this thing here will be totally in the past, and we will have a good laugh about it and um, learn something from it. But I think that's in a consulting role and with everything that can go wrong on projects, it's important to have that perspective.
Thanks. Good perspective on keeping a long-term view on things. Will, how about you?
I'm going to echo what has been said before, but it's very true, right? Things go wrong out in the field, but at the end of the day, it's just data. As long as it's not a safety concern or something like that, it's just data. So it's best not to panic. Keep your head. You can stop, think, assess, and worry about it then. But instead of like say one particular project, I can bring up things that just have gone wrong on all sorts of other projects. That have taught me to pre-plan, make checklists, make sure I have all the equipment, because nothing's as embarrassing as being in, say, middle of Montana, realizing you forgot to bring your wheels for your EM61. You have to get it shipped up from back home, make that phone call and say, oh, Will, how long have you been doing this job? And go, oh, okay. Or when I was in a tunnel for LADWP, as a water tunnel connecting two lakes, and I know I had a nice little, gorilla cart where all my equipment was. We were trying to do a seismic refraction survey, and I dumped a tough book into the water and drowned it and actually killed a tough book on that survey. You make sure you have a backup, and we had to extract the hard drive to get the data off, type of thing like that, right? So that's the best thing I can describe, is to make sure you have backup equipment, because things will go wrong. Because one thing that you learn when you first show up at these jobs is you're going to do a lot of troubleshooting. You're going to do a lot of fixing. Back when we still had Radio Shacks, I knew where every Radio Shack was when I went to a job site, because sometimes you have to go rewire a hammer switch because you broke 3 or 4 of them, and that's all you had. So you had to make a contact closure apparatus with a weight drop or something like that, right? But yeah, so don't panic. These things happen. It's happened to everybody. Just keep calm about it. Make sure you have backups and just work through it.
Oh, I miss Radio Shack. It saved my bacon on more than one occasion. Great. So great input from everybody. I think I'd like to close this out with one final question. If you could give one piece of advice to a junior geophysicist, and again, we've already kind of touched upon this, but if you could give one piece of advice to a junior geophysicist heading out as a project lead on your first survey, what would it be? Jorgen, let me ask you that question to start.
Well, I think we covered most of that. Yeah, I think make sure that you do what you can to eliminate all the risk factors that you can eliminate. Like Will was saying, test equipment and have your checklist, and make sure you know how to take the survey from the first step to the last step. And check the weather forecast. If you're relying on rental equipment, don't have it shipped straight to the site and show up there and opening up boxes and read manuals and stuff. Have it shipped at least to the hotel and take that evening before the survey to set everything up in the hotel parking lot. It's a low stress environment where you can spend whatever time you need to go through the different steps. Don't overestimate your own ability to troubleshoot on the fly, because when you are on that site and it's a live situation, and you never know how many people might be standing around you. Everybody might be curious about what's going on here, and all of a sudden you have 10 people around you asking questions, and the stress level increases a lot when it's that type of setting, and what you may have thought about and figured out in that parking lot is not going to be as obvious for you anymore when you're in more stressed.
Yeah, great input. Will, how about you? What piece of advice, if you could give one, what piece of advice would you give to your junior staff who are heading out as a project lead on their first survey?
I will admit, when I first started in geophysics, I was intimidated by everything and everything happening in general, people knowing more than I did and all that. I just, got out of my bachelor's degree, first jobs and all that sort of stuff, right? So you're afraid to speak up. You're afraid to ask questions. You're afraid to tell somebody something went wrong or speak up to the client about the site conditions. I would say try not to be intimidated. Ask people around you. Ask people more experienced, have done it before, because they are willing to help. And one thing I've noticed with the geophysics field is even competitors, you can give them a call and they will help you out. I've helped out competitors before too, where you can answer questions and ask questions and just get the help you need, because it's really easy to be like, well, you know what, I learned this in school, I can try to figure this out on my own, or just make a bunch of mistakes. But really rely on the resources that you have, and talk to people, because everyone, from my experience, it really is willing to help you and try to help you get through this sort of stuff, help out each other.
Great. Forrest, how about you?
Yeah, very similar to what well, actually, I echo both what Jorgen and Will both said. I think the excuse me, the single most important decision that I've made in my career in this line of work was to get on LinkedIn and to be very active on LinkedIn, because I was hoping that it might bring me work, and it has, not in the way that I thought, but it has brought me a lot of work. But what it's done more than that is it's given me a lot of professional development, where I'm seeing, hey, this guy in the UK, or this guy in Tennessee, or this guy in Cambodia are doing things that are not that different from what I'm doing. They're using the same tools. I bet I could learn to do that. And that's been helpful. But even more than that, what being on LinkedIn has done for me is opened up my network of people upon which I can call for help in the field. Okay, so before I go out, I try to, and if I had some junior guy going out in the fields for the first time on a project all by himself, I would tell him, look, let's think about all the conceivable problem points that you could have here. Okay, you could have problems. Excuse me. You could have problems with your geophysical tool, with your GPR antenna or whatever tool you've got. You could have problems with your just like the side by side that you're using to pull around. You could have problems with your car. You could just have all sorts of different problems. For each problem, find somebody in your network, some friend, some family member, some peer, or even a competitor, like you're saying, Will. Find somebody who would be willing to just talk with you about a problem you've got out in the field and help you figure out how to use duct tape and baling wire or whatever you need to hold things together, to fix it, or to understand what you're seeing in this data. But have some people you can contact, have their phone numbers. And sometimes if you don't know them really well, you've got something of a relationship there. I've called these guys ahead of time and I've said, hey, I'm going out on this project and I think everything's going to go great, but I'm doing this type of work, or I'm bringing this type of tool, and I know you've got way more experience with that than me. If I run into something out there, can I give you a call? And I've never had somebody say no, Forrest, and just hang up. People are willing to help, but having the contact information for people who have a lot more experience than you in this, that, or the other, that has done more for me than I think anything else to help me to have find some level of success. It's just developing and then leaning on my network.
Very good. Well, thank you much, everybody, for all this input. The questions and answers are actually kind of light for this one. If there's anybody that has any questions or that they want to post to the presenters, feel free to type them in the Q&A chat bar, and we'll get right to them. I think we have enough time to spend 60 seconds to talk about to kind of come across one of our funniest stories that we've had from the field. Is there anybody that wants to participate in that? I think, Will, what do you think? Is there anything that you can think of
Mm,
that is a funny anecdote that you can share for the audience?
hmm. I don't know. Sometimes it's funny just because it's tragic type of thing like that. I had one where, and this happens. We had a PS suspension log that was in Mexico, and during customs, they opened up the top head of that sucker and they dropped it and bent it so that it couldn't be sealed anymore to be put down a hole. So we heard about this while they're in Mexico, and my boss came to me and said, "Hey, Will, I saw you just renewed your passport. You're going to Mexico right now." And I think I had about an hour to pack my clothes, get the instrument stuff to get a carnet, to get that thing shipped and carry that thing by hand all the way down to Mexico. Now, the problem was the only thing that could carry it in was either a plastic tube that was like made out of PVC that was, you had all the glue and stuff on it that looked like it was let's be honest, a homemade improvised device if I were to walk that through the airport, or I had another case that was literally labeled bazooka. So I got a lot of stopped by everyone at the airport when I was walking around this thing like, "Hey, is this really a bazooka?" And I'm like, "No." But it didn't help that it was a metal tube inside this black case that no one knew about. And also having to explain that to the Mexican customs, and I'll just say, I did take 3 years of Spanish in high school, and it did not help me very much in Mexican customs trying to get that thing across. So yeah, something like that I remember doing, and I was very tired that day trying to get that thing across the border. And when my coworker said, "Hey, Will, do you want to log the hole when you get here?" and I said, "No, I am not going to do that. I'm going to sit down." So
Oh, wow. Great story. Forrest, 60 seconds. What kind of humorous story can you offer for everybody?
Oh, I mean, just I think I've already told my humor stories. The yeah, just having discussions with guys on site who are arguing with me about, where this line or that line is, and when I ask them, they pull out witching sticks and they say, "I use these, and so I know it's over there." And I wonder, like, well, why did you call me? If you're so convinced that your bent hangers, your bent clothes, like a coat rack hanger, is telling you where this water line is, why are you paying for me to be out here? And those are those are just situations where I just like beat my head against the wall until the bleeding starts, and because it's just so aggravating, trying to deal with situations like that. But that's I've had a couple of those.
Thanks. Jorgen, how about you?
Yes, one story comes to mind. It was a long time ago, but I guess still remember it. So that's how funny that was. We were at Hilton Head, South Carolina, kind of by the coast. A lot of $1 million homes there, and we were inspecting an in-ground pool together with a geotech firm, and I was doing some PPR scanning from the garage side. So you had the in-ground pool kind of on the other side of the garage wall, and this garage was about the size of my whole house, with a lot of places for boats and jet skis and some fancy cars. And in the garage were all the pumps and pipes and things like that for the pool. And when I was stepping across there trying to scan the wall, I managed to knock a piece of PVC pipe loose, and water started coming out. And
Oh no.
we tried to get it back, but couldn't, and we couldn't figure out if there was any type of shut-off valve anywhere. So the homeowner was not there. So long story short, we basically drained his whole pool, and all the water came out, through the garage, and we constantly were pushing water out. At least the garage was at ground level, there and the road leading out from it was kind of sloping downhill, so we had a way of getting the water out of there. But and you can't imagine how long time it takes for an in-ground pool to drain like that. So that was a couple of hours just pushing water out.
Wow.
And when they we got hold of the homeowner, when he came back, and his pool was empty, and he was not a happy camper.
Oh no, that's a small disaster in the making. So that was no time for surfs up, right?
No, we ended up not charging anything for the job, of course. That was uh, a very very an event that was very embarrassing.
Ah, wow. Well, I want to thank everybody for sharing their war stories with us today. We've covered a lot of the gritty real world side of geophysical and NDT work, those kind of problems that never make it into the manuals or the polished presentations. I want to give thanks to Will, Jorgen, and Forrest for sharing their experiences so openly, and for giving us some kind of practical solutions that can come with every story. And finally, I want to give a big thank you again to Contour for sponsoring this session, and to everyone who's joined us live. Now, a link to this recording will be sent to all the registrants after the conclusion of this webinar. And for those of you that have additional questions, feel free to reach out to any of the panelists or to Contour directly. So in closing, stay safe out in the field, everybody. Keep sharing those dinner table and bar stories, and we will see you at the next webinar. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. And thank you to
You.
my presenters.